And then disconnect. And then try connecting again. Amber, you ready to get started?
Someone has their volume on. Your volume on.
Yeah, I want to make sure you're muted. It is like the settings. So it is anything. Okay.
Yeah.
Amber, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yep,
Are we all ready to get started?
yep, sounds great.
I'm gonna start the webinar.
Yes.
Screen share. There you go.
And Amy's doing this. Oh, hi.
Destiny.
Destiny. Let me change the view here.
These fancy nameplates.
You want one?
Sure. Thank you. Did it quiet, like.
Yeah. Duel it out for our name.
I need one. Same things.
Ready? Yes? Fantastic. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first meeting ever of the Government Transition Advisory Committee. Today is Tuesday, April 25th, and we'll be here until 8 p.m. I'm Julia Meyer, I she, her pronouns, and I do engagement and community participation for the transition. We also have Amber Ontiveros with us, and she is going to be our facilitator in general for these meetings and also help us get through our foundational documents in our community education and engagement. We have a bunch of transition team members that get tonight and over the next couple of weeks with us. Next slide, please. So I do want to take a moment and just go over some Zoom logistics. This is a hybrid meeting, so we have a bunch of folks in person and we have a bunch of folks virtual only. This meeting is being recorded and it will be posted on the city's transition website for folks to view it who can't be here tonight. We have closed captioning. We should have American Sign Language, which I will check about. And we have Spanish interpretation. To access the Spanish interpretation, click on the globe icon at the bottom right of your screen and select Spanish. And to access closed captioning, click on the CC button on the bottom right side of your screen. For committee members that are here, please go into your chat settings and make sure it's set to everybody. That means that attendees will also be able to see the chat and can follow along with today's conversation. Chats are part of the public record. And community members who are listening in, we have the Zoom Q&A feature available. So community members who are attendees can submit questions or comments in the Q&A feature. It doesn't mean we'll necessarily be able to answer or respond to all of them, but the Q&A also becomes part of the public record. Today's meeting, we're not going to take verbal public comment, but this may be the only meeting that is like that. So today is a work session, but folks can submit public comment now at any time online by emailing us. And then we're going to start taking verbal public comment at next week's meeting. Next slide, please. So briefly, here's the agenda for tonight. We're going to spend the first half of the meeting just getting to know each other and then workshopping our first set of foundational documents, which include our bylaws, our values, and our working agreements. And then the second half of the meeting, we are going to get a presentation from the city's chief administrative officer and transition project manager on the city's transition plan. There will be plenty of time for Q&A discussion at that time, and then we'll briefly go over next steps. I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amber.
Hi, everyone. It's really exciting to be here. So my name is Amber Ontiveros. I use she, her pronouns. If we could start by introductions. So provide your name, your pronouns, and why you applied to be on this committee. And I'm going to start with stacks of three. And so if we could first start with David, Bill Farber, and then Monty, and then followed by Lori.
Okay. Hi, my name is David. I use he, him pronouns. I applied for this position due to, first of all, I think that Portland City is way overdue for something like this. And I wanted to make sure that the minority population had a seat at the table. And the only way I figured I could do that was by submitting my application, if you will. So thank you.
Thank you. Bill?
Yeah, my name is Bill Farber, he, him pronouns. I applied for a couple reasons. One, I wanted to meet some new people and see who else was crazy enough to sign up for this. But I also, after starting alternative school and getting out of that, I worked in local government for about 25 years and worked for Multnomah County, briefly with the city of Portland, but mostly Multnomah County, Portland School District, and Mount Hood Community College. So I saw a lot of different elected officials and a lot of different systems. And I know Portland can do better than it's been. And I'm especially interested in budget and policy and to see how we can help the new elected officials make good policy decisions based on values, but driven by outcomes and data.
Thank you. Ms. Greenwald? You're on mute. There you go.
Awesome. Sorry, y'all. Got my hands full. You can see the baby. Sorry, I can't be there in person. Great to see everybody and hear from everybody. My name is pronounced Money, like you want to make money. And my pronouns are she and her. And I applied, I just wanted to be, I'm newer to Portland, only 5 years in. So wanted to really feel the fabric of the city and just excited to be, wanted to be a part of this new chapter that I think is super needed for the city. And my background is in policy, so like to nerd out as well on all the changes that are happening.
Thank you. If we could then have Lori, Joe, and Juliet.
Hi, my name is Lori Heffley, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm really excited about being involved. It's funny. I was excited to get involved in this. I've not done anything with government before, but am I doing something?
Oh, sorry. Wait, something to talk about. Oh, yeah, it is, yeah. Here we go.
Okay,
Go ahead.
thank you.
Apologize. It told me to unmute.
Oh my
Thank you.
I've been following the Charter Commission for the last couple of years and really interested in this transition, so I was excited to get involved. My background is in operations management and organizational development, so I'm really interested in how we're going to transition, the government and the work that they're doing. I think it's really important work and excited to be part of it.
Joe?
Hi, I'm Joe Richburg.
Mute yourself.
Oh, I.
Yeah,
you
the room
muted.
mics will pick up everything.
Good. So I'm Joe Richburg. I use he and him. I think this is a confluence of almost all of my professional and personal interests. On the professional side, I started out as a political scientist. And when I decided that wasn't the right career, I was one of that wave of people that came to Portland to retire, as young people in the 70s. And I wasn't very good at retiring, but I found that I fell in love with this city. And I've raised 4 kids here who all love this city. This feels like, not just a generational opportunity, but, maybe a once in a century opportunity to get things right. Our current form of government is a speed bump at best and a huge obstacle at worst. I was on the Charter Commission in 2006 and 7 that put a failing measure on the ballot, but did succeed in the measure that provided for periodic charter review. And so at least I can claim a little bit of credit for what's happened. And I think it's probably relevant that I've worked with most of the city's bureaus during my consulting career.
Julian, are you there? I don't see her, so I'll move on to Zach, Destiny, and Elizabeth. And one other thing, we have quite a few folks, so if you could keep your remarks brief. Thank you.
Everybody at home and hi, everybody on Zach, and I am here as a nerd and geeking out as a policy scientist and also having lived personally through some of the challenges of a commissioner form of government. I formerly worked in the current mayor's office as a policy advisor.
I am Destiny, she, her, aya pronouns. I applied kind of as an existence, being resistance. My parents are immigrants who can't vote. And so I think it's important to show up as community when leadership sometimes isn't failing or policies aren't working for our communities.
Elizabeth, Mavi, and Fred.
Right. Yeah. Hi, Elizabeth Mazar Myers. And actually, there's a few familiar faces in the room. So hi to the folks I know. And I've been working in politics and policy here for just under 20 years. I've been chief of staff to a couple different county commissioners and county chairs. And just seemed like an opportunity to make sure things get done right.
Good evening. My name is Mavi Munoz. I use she, her pronouns. I decided to apply for the committee because I think it was time to have a little bit more representation in terms of having Latinos and folks of color at the table. So I decided to participate. Thank you.
I'm Fred Neal. I have no preferred personal pronouns. Call me what you want. Just do it to my face. My experience in local government, state government is 35 years of toiling in the vineyards, mostly for policymakers, the legislature, county commissioners, the League of Oregon Cities. I've wanted the city's charter to change for the last 50 years. And at last, we're embarking on it. And I want to make sure it succeeds and that both the citizens of the city and the employees of the city are prepared for this when January 2025 shows up.
Parents and Amy Randell, and then Juanita.
Is there somebody before me?
I don't think Terrence.
I don't think Terrence is here. Okay. Amy Randall, Juanita, and then our other Amy Wood.
Hi, my name is Amy Randall. I use she, her pronouns, and I too applied for this committee because this is a perfect confluence of my professional and personal interests. I love the way government works, and I love listening to people and then translating that to policymakers. My professional background is in electoral politics, campaigns, and as a community organizer.
Is there another person before me? Okay, I'll jump in. Hi, my name is Amy Wood, the other Amy. My background is in marketing and communications. And I joined because I believe Portland's at such an interesting juncture and there's a lot of opportunity for improvement. So I'm excited to be part of that improvement. And also I'm excited to help communicate these changes to the public and make sure that everyone in Portland understands, how to use our new form of government properly.
Thank you. I do see Leah Benson, Jane, and then Jose.
Hello, everyone. Leah here. I use she and they pronouns. I'm reporting to you live from a minivan in Eugene today, but I'm looking forward to seeing you all in person moving forward. I decided to join this committee because I am incredibly excited about the new form of government we're ushering in and think that there's so much potential for creating a more engaged citizenry and representative government. And I think the process must or is just as important as the product. So I want to see this be a really engaged part as we build this new form of government and just want to contribute everything I can to that. So good to meet you all. Thank you.
Amber, I missed my turn. Can I go in?
Please.
Please. Okay, my name is Juanita Santana and I use she and her pronouns. And I am I'm very excited to have the opportunity to work with this group and this task. For many years, we talk about the incredible challenge to run a city of this size appropriately and effectively with the number of people in the city council. And so I'm just excited to be here and look forward to work with the team and both the city team as well as the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Juanita. Is Jane here? If Jane is here. Oh,
Yes. Hello. My name is Jane DeMarco. I'm a her and a she. I applied and I'm thrilled to be joining you because I'm an optimist by nature. I've lived in the city for almost 50 years and I've lived through cities with big personalities like Neil Goldschmidt and Vera Katz and Bud. And those days are gone where somebody with such a big personality can make a city work. And we're at this amazing juncture. And the other thing, I want it to work and I'm excited for it to work. But part of the reason I joined was because I want to make sure that we get to November the 24th and we're ready in 24. I'm fearful that this is a big project and I'm worried about project creep. And I want to help make sure that in November of 24, we can go to the polls. Because I think that citizens of Portland have got no capacity at all for this project to fail or to be deferred. So my background is I worked for the Port of Portland for 17 years. I was a teacher and a principal, and my latest job, I did 10 years of the executive director at Lansu Chinese Garden. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jose Gamero Casinelli. I do a lot of work in my community, my neighborhood, and within Multnomah County Democrats. When the charter reform came up, I spent a lot of time understanding it, trying to understand it, and teaching people what it actually meant because it was very complex and getting it passed. And I was very excited when I got it passed. And in doing all that work, I found a lot of the voices against getting it passed were also coming from City Hall. So I thought what better way to make sure it went by quickly was if I applied to be there to lend my voice. And I'm thrilled with all the Latino people that are here because as a I just voted in my first presidential election this past one. So as an immigrant who's also gay and disabled, I know the importance of certain people being at the table, especially being involved in a lot of government groups that are predominantly white that don't have these people at the table. So I appreciate seeing everyone here. Thank you.
Terry Harris, followed by William Kinsey, and if Brianna is there in the Portland building.
I am Terry Harris. I'm he, him. Why did I do this? I just get it up front. I voted no on the charter question for the sole reason that I don't think your multi-member districts are going to work like people think they're going to. I lived in Baltimore for a long time. They didn't work there. So anyway, I voted no. But as the Oregonian wrote, like in the Sunday editorial right after the election, even skeptics have a responsibility to participate and make this thing work. Respect the decision and pull for its success because I live here. So that's why I applied. And I hope to be helpful and positive and still be critical and challenge everyone to do best. All right, thank you.
I'm Bill Kinsey. I welcome Bill. If I hear William, my initial thought is that I've done something that needs correction, but Bill or William will get my attention. I'm a native Portlander, past career as an attorney with the Bonneville Power Administration. Been on past committees and really am excited to help contribute to making this transition successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Did I miss anyone?
I think that would be me.
Oh, Juliet. Yes.
Yes. Good evening. Thanks for having me. I'm Juliet Hyams, and I applied for this committee because I have experience as a city manager. I too did not vote for charter reform, but I don't think that changes that I should contribute something if I can. City's gonna spend a lot of money on this change and recruiting and finding a city manager. I want to see the city prepared to retain that person and treat them well. I also was a neighborhood activist and have served before. I've been appointed to other city committees, and I'm already talking with my neighborhood association about this change and their concerns. And I'll state the obvious, which is this is a huge change and we don't have a lot of time. We've got to get it right. And I'm really concerned about turnover at the city. And I'm really glad that a change management strategy is going to be incorporated. And I look forward to meeting with you all in person.
Thank you, Juliet. Next slide. All right, so let's talk a minute about what your role is. So your role is really to provide recommendations to ensure the charter changes, they're efficient, they're effective, they meet the values of anti-racism, that they're transparent and that they're equitable and that they're fiscally responsible, and they're implemented in a collaborative way. It's important that your communication, your engagement, both internally and externally, with communities are consistent, and their input that you receive is integrated into your decisions. And also, really, it's also about your advisement role to the city on effective transition planning strategies. So quite a few of you have talked about your engagement work in your own communities. So start thinking now about recommendations for engagement opportunities. And throughout later in other meetings, we'll begin developing an engagement plan that you'll help implement. Next slide. All right, so there are 4 foundational documents that you received in your materials. Today, we're only going to talk about 3, the bylaws, the working agreements, and the values documents. So we're going to go through these. I ask that you please hold your comments until we finish each section. The goal of today's meeting is to obtain collectively agreements on revisions that you might have to some of these documents. And then what will happen is at the following meetings, you will then have an opportunity to approve those collective decisions. And last thing before we then go on and move to the actual documents, remember these documents work together. Next slide. All right, so let's talk about the bylaws. In the bylaws, I know there's a lot of information on this slide, but in the bylaws essentially are the method for how you vote. It also describes how those votes apply to your decisions. So the voting method it's called a modified consensus for how you as a committee make decisions. And there's really 4 types of decisions that you make. You're going to be making housekeeping decisions like approving the minutes. You're going to be making process decisions about approving the bylaws, creating subcommittee, like for example, on community engagement. And so you'll be making recommendations in those subcommittees that then you will bring back to the full committee for consideration. And then the last other proposals will be on city recommendations. Now, in terms of the way the actual modified consensus process works, if there's no opposition to a proposal, the proposal will be reflected in the minutes as though it's adopted. If there is opposition, we'll take a roll call vote. And in order for the proposal to pass, you'll need 50% plus 1 of the votes in favor of the proposal. And then just in terms of process, because there's so many of you and we really want to hear all of you, please raise your hands, use the raise hand feature so that I can call on you in order. The other thing is in the bylaws, there's no absentee voting and there's no proxy voting. So some of you may have a different perspective on what a modified consensus approach for voting is, but let me walk through the other 2 slides on getting you oriented to the bylaws and then we can talk about it. Next slide. All right, so I know there's a lot of information. Joe, if you can just hold for just a moment until I finish thank you, sir. So the committee was created by the mayor and the city council. They've approved each of you to participate on this committee. So we discussed your roles earlier in the meeting. What's the city's role? The city's role is they've designated staff, resources for you. They've hired me, a facilitator, to help you carry out decisions. There will be public notice of your meetings. They'll be posted on the website. That enables you to obtain feedback and input from the broader community that you then can incorporate into your decisions. So you're also required to meet at least 8 times in a calendar year between now and 2025. The bylaws, they also give you the authority to provide direction on things like hearing requirements, creating subcommittee, like I mentioned. It also includes steps. How are you going to work together? It includes language around creating a respectful environment for how you engage and communicate with each other, with city staff, and even with myself. And there is a provision, if you can see in the right-hand side, around conflicts of interest requirements. Essentially, you're required to announce any conflicts of interest for each time there is a conflict of issue where you may be acting on something that comes before this committee. And this will also be recorded and reported to the city council. And I believe that the city attorney is here, and I'm sure at some point there will be like a detailed, conflict of interest training. So I'm sure some of you are interested in having a more in-depth conversation about conflict of interest. So again, if we can hold until we get through the bylaws. So we want to leverage your strengths and your networks. Many of you talked about your background and all of the relationships we have. We want to encourage you to use your networks outside of these meetings. It would be great if you could take that information and bring it back to the committees or to this committee so that that perspective can be folded into your decision-making. So one question is, how do you do that? How would it be collectively be folded into your decision-making? How would you track public engagement, if at all, and how you want to incorporate it into your decision-making process? Next slide. All right, there are procedures on how members are removed. There are leadership positions. There are two co-chair positions. They'll serve approximately 3 months. Those co-chairs will be approved by the overall committee. For those of you that are interested in being co-chairs, what are your responsibilities? That includes supporting me, the facilitator, collaborating with the staff like Julia, and you'll do everything from, developing agendas, making guidance on approaches for the meetings, as well as for the public meetings, and just simply leading these conversations. So co-chairs, they can also remove members for things like absences or, not disclosing conflicts of interest. But again, those, even though they make those recommendations, ultimately the overall committee will have to approve them. In terms of resignations, of course, you may resign, in which case you'll need to send a notification to the co-chairs as well as the OMF liaison. And then there are some members that are designated as alternates. So those resignations will be filled by the alternates. So for those of you that are considering being a co-chair, think of me as I'm your support team. That's my role as the facilitator. I'll help you develop your agendas, compile the information, and collaborate with you in the city to help you essentially carry out the vision of this work. So given the nature of this work in this body, transparency is really important. So you're required to notify the committee on any communication related to the committee's work with interest groups. And if you're contacted by the media, one of the things that's stated in the bylaws is that you direct media to the co-chairs, and one of their roles is to help to determine who from the committee is in the best position to respond to that. And all communication between you, other committee members, and the public, as well as media and interest groups, will be part of the public record. Okay, so I'm going to pause so that we can, if you have a proposal, please make your proposal, and then we'll need to, again, have collective agreement on that. And I saw Joe had his hand up.
Yes, it was. I put it down again because I apologize for jumping the gun. Amber, there are a lot of mentions of modified consensus. And I understand that voting is sort of the last resort. I'd like to ask you a little bit about what your process is that you'll lead us through to achieve consensus, so that we don't get to that last resort unless we have to.
So essentially what I do is I ask questions, I frame questions towards the group to help you narrow your thinking down towards a specific outcome. Juanita?
Question.
Reactions. Juanita, I believe that you're on mute.
I was assumed that I'm heavy. Okay, and the last page, under public meetings and public records, it is member that committee members can participate through telephone or other electronics communication. Can we add, just for clarification, as part of our meeting process, that the meeting means that we can attend it in person via Zoom or telephone, just to be clear. That's just clarity issue. It's not, and if people feel that is not important, I'm fine with that. But I just thought that it does not mention at all in the bylaws. The other question I have is about on page number 5, regarding public participation. Under public, it mentions that there may be times when committee members choose not to disclose the source of the information. I'm a little bit concerned about that because that will go against transparency. I've been hearing a lot in every document that I have read about transparency and accountability, conflict of interest. And I just wanted to get the reaction of the group about that. Is it okay to come to a meeting and say, this is the information, but not to say where it comes from? That's the question I have. And then this is kind of, I think, hopefully we'll have to discuss that, but just the question is that the purpose of the committee is to advise. That's the first paragraph of the bylaws. And then later on, it says that powers and duties to ensure input is meaningfully integrated into the city implementation of the November board approved charter. So there's a little bit of a contradiction there, and it would be nice to, again, if people feel comfortable with that, that's okay with me too. But I mean, I just thought it is a little bit of a contradiction. If you advise, it's just advising, or do we say if we approve and submit the recommendation to the city council? Is that just kind of clarifying that? That's all. That's all I have. Thank you.
So I then have Fred and Amy, and then before I move on, so Juanita, there is a way that you can make there's a way that you can call in to Zoom. It's in the feature. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, no, I know that. It's just that it's not specifically clarified in the language of the bylaws, but I mean, like I said, it's just an observation. And if people feel comfortable with that, it's fine.
Fred, Amy, and Joe.
Thank you, Amber. Go on mute.
You don't have to unmute yourself.
Hello. I thought I was being so good. I follow up on Joe's question, Amber. So I gather that you frame the questions as they evolve through the discussions and the questions, and no one makes a motion that would be seconded or not. And there's no motions. Is that correct? So we're not following that kind of rule of procedure?
Correct.
So again, when do you decide that there's something to be approved or otherwise voted on.
Well, for example, the comment that Juanita just made, I would, after I finished going through yours and the other comments, then I would mirror back those comments and have a discussion on them.
Oh, we'll try it.
Amy and Joe?
I can go. I kind of now have echo this question about, so is it like somebody would make a motion to make a change, or we would submit a motion to you, or we would submit a motion? That's a new question. Old question is, can you say a little bit more about the process not to include proxy votes or votes? I saw that those were outlawed in all of them. I just wanted to know more about that decision.
Is the city attorney here to answer that question?
I am. I'm in the back.
Let's get
I don't think that.
If you
virtual
could
folks
step
can
forward
hear
to
you.
make sure that you're being heard by that. I don't know if the mic goes that far.
Yeah.
Thank you, sorry.
So I'm Maya with the City Attorney's Office, and I'll be one of the 2 attorneys who will be supporting the work you're doing. My pronouns are she, her, and the reason for the prohibition against proxy and absentee votes is that there has to be explicit authority for that type of voting in a statute, and that simply doesn't exist here. So the authority you've been delegated by the council cannot be further delegated. So that's why there's the prohibition. I'm gonna head back now.
Joe?
This may or may not belong in the bylaws, but when I read the transition plan, it was clear that the city's transition team is going to be doing a lot of work, and that we're going to be doing a lot of parallel work, and that there ought to be some way to have regular communication and liaison between the two. We're meeting every month or every couple of weeks, and lots could happen in between. So I think it might be appropriate to add a bullet to the co-chair's responsibility to serve as liaison to the transition team.
Does anyone else have their hands up? I can't tell. No.
Elizabeth is trying to raise her hand and send a message asking for help.
Someone just told me I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah. I do that all the time.
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
See something new.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump the line there. Sorry, back to a process question around folks are making comments. You listen to all the comments and then read back. So if we have something to say about somebody else's comment, should we jump in and say, I want to respond to what Joe said, or should we wait for everybody to say something about whatever it is, and then you read back and then we respond? I feel like it's process that's confusing me a little.
Sure. So for example, someone just made a proposal to add the co-chairs to serve as liaison to the transition team. So that's a proposal that y'all want to consider. Does anyone else support that proposal? If someone else supports that proposal, someone can make a motion to approve that. If there's no opposition, then that would be adopted and we would move on.
Okay, and sorry, and are you actually asking someone to make a motion on that now? Because I have a lot of questions about that particular proposal, or that was just an example. Sorry.
That is just an example, yes.
My question is answered.
David, followed by Juanita.
I think that's a great idea to have a liaison between us and the transition team. However, I think that we need to create that position separately from the chair, since the chairs are going to be serving such short terms anyway, and that could possibly create some confusion on who is supposed to reach out to who, when, where, what. If we have somebody in a more of a long-term position like that, I think that would reduce the amount of possible miscommunication.
Juanita?
Yes, I guess I have to agree with David in terms of the concern about how the communication ends up, taking place. And so we are going to be meeting based on the schedule that we receive almost twice a month in some cases, until later, we can look for specific times. But I would like to have access to, and it's something that we need to talk about later, I'm sure, when we look into the plan, if there's a good breakdown in terms of the timelines and they are breaking even more, because there's some areas there that are very critical. And I think it's important that the whole committee is aware of everything that is happening. And maybe I'm misunderstanding the process of the liaison, or what would be the responsibility of a liaison between, the co-chairs and the team. So if we can clarify that, again, just to make sure that we don't create barriers to communication with the whole group. That would be my only concern.
So Juanita, in later in the presentation, we are going to go through the schedule, but Julia, can you answer the latter part of Juanita's question?
What was it?
Can you answer the latter part of Juanita's question?
Can you repeat the question?
It was more of a comment in terms of, well, the question was, if we decide to do the liaison, what does that mean? And just to ensure that we don't create barriers to the communication for the whole group. That's all, because we're going to be meeting regularly together, all of us. So the team can come, and if we have questions, we can give them to Julia and they can come and answer our questions. I don't know, but I'm just, again, trying to limit the levels of, communication, because the more levels you have and the more liaisons you have, we may end up losing a little bit of content. Just an observation.
Jane?
Thank you very much. I think that what Amber is proposing is sort of like a way of, it's called getting to yes, which is to ask, we all talk amongst ourselves, some of us agree or what have you, and ultimately we're all nodding around the table. And I think that we should give that a go. I think we should give it a go for at least 4 meetings, because otherwise, if we get into a point where we have to vote on everything, it'll really slow it down. And so my recommendation here is that we're so new. The city does this a lot, and they've sort of worked out what does work with advisory committees. So, and I think there will be times when half the room thinks one thing and half the room thinks another thing, and that's where we're getting to the voting thing as it's clearly outlined here. So I'd like to support Amber in her getting to yes. And then regarding how we interact with the fabulous city team, which is big and working its tails off, I'm interested in hearing from Mike later on down when, there's the transition plan itself, because usually there's sort of like a scope of work, and you kind of like say, this would be an appropriate time to hear from the advisory committee, because we have some things that we need a little help on. And so I think maybe at this juncture, and we might decide down the road not to go that way, but we sort of like let the work roll out and see how that works. And I know that Julia did a lot of work in aligning the meetings based on the city work in order for it to feed in. So rather than making more process, and if anybody was looking to be, sort of like a co-chair, that's adding a lot more work to the co-chair's job. And we want people to step up to be a co-chair. But I think that we wait to hear from Mike and we see the plan and we see how Julia's at least first 4 or 5 meetings roll out, because she knows, I think the city knows where they want to hear from us. So I think that maybe what I'm suggesting is that we just sort of like trust the process that our experts have sort of set up and see how it goes. And then if we don't like or it's wonky or, we futz with it a bit later. Because I recognize that there's a tremendous amount of work and past history that's gone into all of this structural process stuff.
Thank you, Jane. I'm going to move to Jose, and then we need to move on to some other the other documents, but then I want to wrap this item up. Please, Jose.
Yes, mine is a little different than what's been talked about. I was reading about the quorum, that if we need to vote, if the modified consensus doesn't work, it's 8 committee members. But being that we can't have absentee or proxy voting, if there's absent people, do alternates, can they just step in and vote at that point? Or alternates only stepping in if someone actually resigns? Because then if there's 2 people missing, 8 is going to be a lot harder to reach if we're already at a point where we have to vote. So I'm not sure if that's not very clear what would happen in those situations.
So point of clarification, Jose, that's a really good question. So the modified consensus is based on the voting members. Alternates become voting members if there is a resignation or someone is removed. That's the process. And so right now we have 2 proposals on the table. One is that the co-chairs serve as liaisons to the transition team. And Jane recommends that we move ahead with the bylaws. Jane, given the other proposal, would you consider adding the co-chair serving as a liaison?
If the team thinks it's a fab idea, of course I'd go along with it. My thought was let's see how it goes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've known each other for about 24 minutes and
yes.
And so the idea that we're going to both talk about co-chairs and then what their duties are feels a little premature, even if in a couple of meetings that might seem like the right thing to do. So I'm not quite there yet, even if it turns out to be a good idea.
Yes.
Did you have another question, Jose?
Yeah, I just want to, because my question before you clarified it, so I guess I'm just concerned if we have 2 committee members absent and we have to vote, it doesn't say 50% of committee members present, it says 8. So that means if people are absent, we'd still have to get to 8, which will be a harder threshold. And is that on purpose? Or is it 50% of quorum of the people that are there? Because usually it's based on people that are there, not like a fixed number.
Just to clarify, I apologize. It is for those that are present.
Yeah, it is a typo.
So I'm sorry. We need to move on. We need to move on to the presentation by Mike.
Yeah.
And I'm not handling the slides. Julia, can someone advance? Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so. All right, so let's talk about the values document. The values document is the city council describes your role. These are the core values of the city. The values include anti-racism, equity, and accountability. So I'm going to walk through them so you can begin thinking about how you would apply them to your work. After that, we can discuss if you want to add any additional values. So later you're going to, for example, you're going to hear from the city transition team. The question you should be thinking about as it relates to these values is how can you be applying these values and how you assess information and recommendations to the city and with each other. So how is the transition team, how is the transition implementing anti-racism in its practices? What recommendations do you have as a committee for addressing anti-Blackness? What recommendations would you have for implementing equity through removing systemic barriers in implementations for change? Strategies for rebuilding trust, and what tactics do you recommend for engaging a variety of communities in a meaningful way? And how is the city's work accountable to these values? So those are these values. Next slide. Let's talk about transparency, communication, and collaboration. Those are really intimately intertwined. How are you holding yourself accountable to these values, and how are you applying these values in your recommendation to the city's transition work? So communication, it can be a catalyst for change. It can build trust, and especially if it's transparent and working together through you in a unified voice. Can you provide the city with a strategic, unified objective for change? Communication, it's not just about putting something out, it's about listening to the community, to decision makers in a transparent and collaborative way, and with each other and with me. So fiscal responsibility, that pertains to how are inequities addressed in budgeting. So begin thinking about, how would you center fiscal resilience in climate and equity in the transition work? And we want agreement on any revisions to these values. So are there any recommendations for improving the values? Thoughts, reflections? Jane, did you still have your hand up, or?
No, I did not. Sorry.
Okay. Destiny?
Thank you, Amber. If the last slide could be returned, please. Under equity, I was wondering, and this is an addition, if we could acknowledge the city of Portland's exclusionary history. I don't know if that's a legal thing, but I think that would be great if we're talking about the city's anti-racism and accountability pieces to build off of that, to have that included.
And just a point of clarification, when you say acknowledge exclusionary policy, can you state a little bit more about what you mean by which exclusionary policy?
Well, if we think about historical, we can look at like Vanport's flooding, the city purposely put, like they did not want to house specific races coming in for work and labor. We can think about the Coliseum, I-5. I mean, there is a lot of history of exclusion. I don't know, again, if this is legal, but I think if we're talking about moving forward in an anti-racist and accountable and equitable way, I think that should be included if we're being honest.
Okay, thank you. So I then see Juliet.
Yeah, I have a comment on the other slide. I get nervous when I see the word transparent. I know it's commonly used, but it's highly subjective and I've seen it abused and misused. And I wonder if the city has a definition of it or if there's one that we could use and refer to, because I'm afraid it will backfire at some point.
So which one again? I'm sorry, Juliet.
Transparency is a highly subjective term and, you know, it's in the eye of the beholder. And so people, I think without a clear definition of it, it means different things to different people and tends to form expectations. And then when things don't meet the expectations, it can go sideways or at least consume extra time as opposed to having a clear definition of that, of its meaning and even a way to measure it.
So can we go back to, there was a proposal to change, add a language around acknowledging the exclusionary policies such as housing, et cetera. Is there any opposition to that proposal?
Point of clarity, I just noticed that it's there's an acknowledgement about the state's exclusionary history and equity. I just want to clarify, are we adding to that cities and then we're adding that value into anti-racism and in addition to the where we're having an inequity, I guess.
Can I comment? I don't know how the system works, but I was just saying acknowledge the states and the city of Portland's exclusionary history. Yeah, inequity is fine. It all builds the three, right?
Right. Great. Okay, so that's a friendly amendment. Is there any opposition to that proposal? If I hear no opposition, then we will make the modification and it will be recorded in the minutes. Okay, so one last item and then we're going to move on. Juliet, you had made the recommendation around defining transparency. Can you please review this values document and provide a proposed definition for how you would like to see transparency and email it to us for consideration in the next meeting?
Yes, I can.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, thank you.
All right, we're running out of time. So I now need to move to Mike. So we're going to hear from Mike Jordan, the city's chief administrative officer, and Shoshana Oppenheim, the transition project manager. They're going to spend about 30 minutes of their presentation on the city's transition plan, and then we're going to have time for Q&A following that. So again, they have a lot of content to go through. So please hold your questions and comments until the end.
Thank you, Amber. I guess we'll get started. Everybody's ready. Sounds like you guys have done an awful lot of work already. This is, first meeting, so everybody's kind of on edge and thinking about what we're doing, where we're going. We're going to try to fill in tonight a little bit about what we've been up to and what we're hopeful to engage you all with during this time. I'm Mike Jordan. I'm the city's chief administrative officer. I'm also the sponsor of the project to implement the charter reforms for the city. I'm joined tonight by Shoshana Oppenheimer, who is the transition project project manager. Also in the room, Daniel McCardle James is here, communications manager. Sophia Alvarez Castro is here, inclusive democracy project manager. Nicole Forbes, transition coordinator. And Becky here, I don't see Becky tonight. But Julie Meyer, of course, GTAC and community engagement and participatory project manager. Thanks for the opportunity to be here and update you on our work and where we are headed. I want to take a second, though, to make sure I say thank you. This is a huge commitment, and it will be a significant amount of your time. And I appreciate that you all have real lives and real things that you have to do. And your commitment to the city in doing this is extraordinary, and we are incredibly grateful to you for doing that. You've been appointed by the council to provide them with your best advice. Also, to provide me and the project team with your advice on issues related to the development and implementation of the transition plan. You will serve as the main public engagement body for the transition with a focus on community education and engagement activities related to the project. We intend, with your help, to implement the charter amendments following the city's core values: anti-racism, equity, communication, collaboration, transparency, and fiscal responsibility, and align the project with the Charter Commission's intent and their desired outcomes. Sometimes in the city of Portland, it's hard to know who's accountable for anything. I want to assure you that at the end of the day, you and the citizens of the city get to hold me accountable for the delivery of this project and ensuring that the project is leading with the city's core values and Charter Commission's intent. So we're here today to get your input on the draft transition plan, which helps us shape the scope and schedule and budget for the project. I hope that when we leave today, we'll at least be a little closer to having a shared understanding of the project and its complexity and our priorities and strategies to deliver for Portlanders. I'd also like to have a discussion at some point about the key points where GTAC can inform our work. As you read through the draft plan and hear today's presentations, please keep a few things in mind. One, what's missing? What do we need to fill in the blanks for? What do you want to hear more about that we've just touched on and we want to go deeper into? And how do you want to be engaged? We have our own thoughts about what are the points of or milestones that we really are going to need your help, but we also want to hear your thoughts about where and how to be engaged. You'll see that throughout this presentation, we marked some of the slides with yellow stars. Those are the ones we'd like you to take particular attention to because we especially want to hear about your thoughts on partnership with you and getting your feedback in refining our work. So, to the point, back in November, Portlanders voted to change the city government in 3 significant ways. First, allow voters to rank candidates in order of their preference using ranked choice voting. Second, creating 4 new geographic districts with 3 members elected to represent each district, expanding the city council to a total of 12 members. And third, replacing the commission form of government with a city council that focuses on setting policy and a mayor elected citywide to run the city's day-to-day operations with the help of a professional city administrator. That is a lot of big change. Our understanding is that the reforms in the voter-approved charter amendment are intended to make Portland's government more accountable, more transparent, whatever that means, more efficient and effective, responsive, and representative to every area of our city. Making sure city business gets done and done well is really our highest priority in this project. Transitioning away from the commission form of government allows for a more holistic and systemic approach to problem solving. Our current 28 bureaus and offices, we're hoping at the end of the day, will be pulling more in one direction under the leadership of the city administrator that reports to our mayor. Implementing ranked choice voting with district elections puts Portland at the leading edge of engagement and representation and advancing democracy. Clear roles and responsibilities at the leadership level, we are hoping will promote accountability for our decision making. Next slide. So today, we'd like to talk a little bit about our transition plan, our draft transition plan. It's meant to outline the scope and schedule, milestones and budget for the project, highlighting key decision points for the GTAC and opportunities for community engagement. We also hope that the plan introduces the community to our approach to the project and helps to communicate the complexity and the dynamic nature of the work ahead. Next slide, please. When we look at this project, it is significant in its scope, but we tend to look at it in phases. And this initial phase that we will mostly be interested in working with you in is a phase for the immediate transition, which really is now through election day in 2024 and hopefully January 1 when we have a new council and mayor that take office. So starting with those immediate tasks to be accomplished to comply with the charter, that's delivering that election using ranked choice voting. It's establishing a voter education program at the city as required by the charter. Also providing the 2025 council and mayor with enough information about their roles and how they can do business so that they can perform their work from day one in January 1st, 2025. And then establishing an organizational structure for a new city administrator. The phase 2 is much less defined since we haven't even started really into phase 1. And we know that phase 2 will be, as I would put it, much more about culture change, much more about aligning the way we behave with the intent behind new lines on org charts and new rules for how elections are done and new roles for our elected officials. It will take time for that culture to take hold in a new way of doing business. And so we really think phase 2 will be a lot about that, but I'm sure there are other things that we haven't envisioned yet for future phases. And then of course, phase 3, even further out into the future. One of the things that we are hoping for, just as an aside, is that as we go through the organizational changes and thinking about how we deliver services in a better way, we also know that there will be a huge number of ideas that come from our current employees and the current management that we won't be able to attack in this short period of time in the interim. And so we are hoping to catalog those ideas, my terminology, beat them up a little bit to see if they're worthwhile, but also be able to hand them off to a new administrator and a new mayor to be able to think about how does the executive branch deliver services in a more efficient and effective way for Portlanders that we know will be longer term kinds of changes. So something I think we need to continually keep in mind, and I'll move to the next slide that really talks about just phase 1. In that transitioning to the new mayor and council form of government, I hope you will keep some things in mind as you look at the things on these lists, which are really just the activities that we need to perform in phase 1. Please continually keep in mind that there is an urgency to some aspects of these things that is maybe above the urgency of others. So your advice about what's most important and what are the things most to focus on will be really important for us. And then secondly, the critical prerequisites that we need to have in place for a first mayor under this new structure to hire the first city administrator? What are the prerequisites that we have to have in place to attract world-class candidates to that job? Please always keep those things as in mind as we go through. Next slide, please. So we've thought about the mission for our work and the transition plan. And at the top line, you can see it. It's the top line. Implement the voter-approved charter amendments. But to more detail, how do we go about doing that? And we have already stated that our intent is to follow the city's core values. We certainly want to serve the voters' intent by following the Charter Commission's goals and outcomes that they were trying to do. We also want to make sure that at the end of the day, when we've done our education work and we put things in place, that Portland has a more informed and politically active, all of our communities are more politically active than they have been. And then lastly, bottom bullet is basically project management stuff. Deliver on time, deliver on budget, deliver on scope. That's our job. So we're really focused on both the higher level outcomes that we want in the community when we're done, but also we know we have to deliver real time and hit deadlines and make things happen. So that's our input. What we would hope from you is that if you have thoughts about this mission, please give us your thoughts. We know we probably haven't hit everything we need to be thinking about. I have to say, just speaking for myself, I'm a bit of a functionaire. I'm really scope, schedule, budget. Let's get this done on time and on budget. But I know there are more important things that you all are here to help us see that we may not be seeing within the staff realm. So your input will be incredibly important. And then lastly, for me, before I hand it off to Shoshana, the next slide, please. Regarding engagement. The city's committed to a community-driven process to inform its decision-making and an equitable, accessible, and transparent community engagement process. Over the next couple of months, the project team and you all will be developing an engagement plan for the transition. The plan will include the framework or approach to engagement, activities for engagement by transition area, and a calendar for those activities. There are two other transition-related community bodies in addition to GTAC. Please remember, the Independent District Commission and the Salary Commission are also engaging Portlanders in the transition. You see on the slide here a variety of activities and tools and venues. I know, and the team knows that with you, developing the engagement plan with your input on these activities will be incredibly important. And your thoughts about which of these activities are most valuable when will be incredibly important also. Whether it's the messaging we're trying to deliver, the input we're trying to garner from citizens through this process, and the timing of those questions will be really important for us being successful. A lot of why you're here is to be the community's voice in how we can do that best. So we really appreciate all of your thoughts on these things. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Shoshana, the person who actually knows what's going on, and somebody who can tell you about how the project's going to run. Please, Shoshana, thank you.
Thank you. Next slide. So I'm just looking at the time. I know that our presentation is just like the project, very ambitious. So, I don't want to race through the following slides. So you can give me some cues as to when I need to speed up or if we need to come back and share some more information with you. Shoshana Oppenheim, I use she, they pronouns, and I'm the transition project manager. And this slide for you shows major milestones outlined in the charter amendments and milestones that we need to meet in order to deliver for Portlanders and ensure that we're ready for our first ranked choice voting election in November of 2024 and a new form of government opening in January of 2025. We have met many of our first milestones, launching the Independent District Commission, the Salary Commission, and this body. And we also the City Council has adopted revisions to our elections code that aligns with the charter changes, establishing how ranked choice voting will be used in the 2024 election, and allowing the counties to adopt the changes to their election software for voter tabulation. We have launched a competitive RFP to select a citywide voter education and outreach partnership coordinator. Their role is to partner with the city and develop and implement the citywide voter education campaign. We have also launched the first phase of our organizational assessment. This will point us towards an organizational structure that will report to a city administrator. We have also begun the work to ensure that our future council has the policies needed to open their first council meeting and in the first week of January 2025, and that they'll be in facilities that are safe, welcoming, and accessible. By August, the Salary Commission will complete their work establishing the salaries of our elected officials. In September, the District Commission will establish maps for our 4 geographic districts for our city council elections. We will launch a voter education campaign to ensure that Portlanders have the information that they need to exercise their choices on their ballots. And this fall, we will establish a reporting structure for the organization reporting up to a city administrator. A key milestone in the development of this work is the adoption of the budget for the fiscal year 2024-25. This budget will span the current form of government and the new council mayor form of government with the addition of a city administrator. Each milestone outlined on this slide is managed by a member of our transition team. We are a small but mighty team of project managers, engagement and community leaders, and we are laser focused on delivering for Portlanders. And I'm excited for you to meet some of the members of our team in the coming weeks and months, and for us to share all we've accomplished and the work that there is to do. Next slide. The project sponsors and the project team are committed to using the change management best practices in the planning and implementation of the changes. We are developing a guiding change management vision for the project, as well as specific strategies centered on the different needs of the various aspects of the work. Change management is the application tools for leading the people side of change to achieve the desired outcomes. By focusing on the people who will experience and lead the change, there's greater long-term and durable success. In projects like this one, which include organizational, structural, and physical changes, it is critical for the city and our employees, our leadership, and our residents to have a shared vision of the future state with shared ownership for the outcomes. To help the city navigate this multifaceted changes, the city administrator has launched a competitive request for proposals to select a partner in organizational development and change management. The city selected Next Strategies, a firm with deep experience supporting public agencies through transformative change. Next Strategies will support the city with implementing the Cotter change management approach, which is appropriate for the size, scale, and urgency of the project. The Cotter methodology outlined on this slide is appropriate for the project because of its size and scope. I'm going to skip forward a little bit because I feel like I want to make up a little bit of time. So there's more to learn about change management, but as you see, there's a yellow star on this slide. So your experience in change management will be critical to our success. If there are things that we can learn from you, we are open to being students, and we are also interested in incorporating them. Next slide, please. Now we'll turn to a discussion about scope, scale, and the changes that flow from transitioning from a commission form of government to a mayor council form of government with a legislative council and an executive mayor that runs the city with the help of a city administrator. Starting in January of 2025, city councilors will no longer oversee bureaus, which will allow them to focus on creating policies and connecting with constituents in their districts. The mayor will serve as the city's chief executive. This is a big change from the way the city operates now, with councilors overseeing bureau structure. Next slide. This slide outlines how the legislative and executive powers are split between the council and the mayor. We will see the council adopting ordinances and making laws for the city, but you will see less executive actions at council. I know you're going to get this slide in your packet afterwards and be available for you. So I'm just going to kind of breeze through. There definitely is the separation of executive functions and legislative functions. That was a clear desired outcome from the Charter Commission, and it's reflected in the changes that we'll see in the roles and responsibilities for the elected officials. Next slide, please. The charter includes the appointment of an independent salary commission to establish the salaries of the city's elected officials. This removes a longstanding conflict of interest with the elected officials establishing their own salaries and the salaries of their peers. The mayor appointed and the council approved 5 members of the salary commission and 2 alternates. The Bureau of Human Resources and the transition team and our own Jamie Duhamel, who's here in the back, are supporting the commission as they develop a methodology and consider the new roles and responsibilities of the elected officials under our new charter. The commission has the authority to establish the salaries and the methodology used to support their decision. And I look forward to an opportunity for Jamie to be here, where you can talk more about the work of the Salary Commission and our progress. Next slide, please. This slide includes several streams of work. And if we had all the time in the world, we would dive deep into each of them. But I'm just going to address them at a very high level. And again, note the star here that we really want your thoughts about how we've prioritized the changes that need to be in place for 2025. Budgeting. The new form of government, in the new form of government, the mayor will annually propose the budget to council by May 5th each year. The council will amend and approve the budget. Bureau budgets will no longer be submitted individually by bureau directors to the mayor. Instead, we will have a budget submitted to the city administrator and by the city's budget officer. The city administrator will work with the mayor to submit a budget to the council. Reviewing and revising the process, the budgeting process, will continue to be led by the city's budget office. The city budget office is managing the transition to a new budgeting process. This is a critical deliverable to ensure that the continuity of operations of the city. Facilities. Our current facilities are built for the existing leadership, 4 commissioners and a mayor elected citywide. Our city facilities team is developing a plan to build safe, welcoming, and accessible workspaces for the 12-member council, the city administrator, and their staff. On April 19th, council authorized a procurement process called the construction manager general contractor process, which will award a single contract for design and construction. This approach will allow the city to be nimble and to develop a plan for council chambers large enough to accommodate the expanded city council and workspaces for the city council, their staff, the mayor, and the city administrators. Code revisions. Every element of the city code will be reviewed to ensure alignment with our new charter. Staff will work with subject matter experts in the city attorney's office to revise any code sections so that the roles, responsibilities, and authority are clearly outlined in the code. This is critical work to ensure that we can continue the operations in our new form of government. The role of the city administrator is defined in the charter. In the summer of 2023, this summer, the city will seek community input on what skills and talents should be included in the job description and the recruitment plan for the person that's mayor in 2025 will be able to attract and hire the city's first city administrator. Bureau of Human Resources has generated a position description, and our plan is to review that job description with this committee at an upcoming meeting and share more broadly for review and comment. Next slide, please. The city is developing a new reporting structure that organizes bureaus under the management of the city administrator rather than reporting to the 5 council offices. This transition opportunity also considers improvements to how we deliver services. Last month, the city launched a programmatic assessment, began in partnership with the council offices and bureau leadership to determine the programmatic alignment within the 5 service areas assigned by the mayor in January 2025. Community and employee feedback is essential to this work. We have launched our first survey, and I heard earlier today that we already had 900 responses so far from our employees and over 100 from managers. Organizational structure needs to be in place by October of 2023 to inform the budgeting process for fiscal year 2025. As I mentioned, it's a critical year spanning 2 forms of government. After the structure changes are made, the project will focus on implementing the technical and employee changes that need to be made to successfully implement the new management structure. Thoughtfully crafting, communicating, and engaging our staff and leadership in this change initiative is one of our guiding principles for this work. Next slide, please. Starting in November of 2024, Portland voters will have the opportunity to rank candidates in order of their preference. The voter-approved charter amendments also require City Council to adopt an elections code for the administration of ranked choice voting and require the city to conduct periodic voter education campaigns to familiarize Portlanders with ranked choice voting. On April 19th, 2023, Council adopted an election code that was developed in collaboration with Multnomah County and a work group together of our own city elections office, our city attorney, county attorneys, in order to make sure that we were in alignment. The code eliminates the primary for candidate elections. In 2025, special elections will no longer be used to fill vacancies. The code establishes ranked choice voting to elect the mayor, auditor, and the 12 city councilors. Provides a system for write-in candidates to certify their candidacies 7 days prior to the election. The revisions also clarify and streamline the code. Next slide, please. The biggest change for Portland voters is that they'll be able to rank candidates in order of their preference for city contests. The ballot will look something like what's on the slide. Filed candidates and spaces for write-in candidates will be listed in the grid. And the voter can rank up to 6 candidates for each contest. Candidates will be elected in general elections in November of even years. As I said before, there'll be no more primaries for candidate-based elections. Voters will receive their ballot and return it similar to what they do now, by mail or in drop boxes. Next slide, please. There are 2 primary areas of work remaining to effectively implement ranked choice voting: voter administration of ranked choice voting contests and voter education. As I'm sure many of you know, in Oregon, counties are responsible for election administration. Portlanders live in 3 counties: Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington. These 3 counties are working in partnership to ensure every Portland vote is counted correctly at our first ranked choice voting election in November of 2024. As a result of the election reforms the counties will need to update certain aspects of their election systems for administering community contests. Multnomah County Elections Division is coordinating with Washington and Clackamas counties and with their systems vendor, printing and mailing vendors, and the Secretary of State to ensure that we're ready for the election. Finally, ranked choice voting has implications for how results are recorded. Final results for ranked choice voting contests will show the ultimate outcome as well as round by round tabulations. While the administration of elections falls to the counties, the city also has a role to stay involved and have constant communication with the counties to ensure that they have necessary support to administer the city's ranked choice voting elections. Voter education is a critical component for the successful implementation of ranked choice voting. Voters need to feel confident that their ballot, confident in their ballot, and that their votes will be tabulated in ways that they intended them to be. This is only possible with a robust voter education campaign. The voter-approved charter amendments require the city to conduct periodic voter education campaigns. And as we know, as I mentioned earlier, we've already launched an RFP for a partner in this work. Next slide, please. I just do a time check. I can breeze through. So as this slide shows, again, an area for your input and collaboration. There are three main channels that the city is planning on using for our voter education. Our government established campaign channels, candidate training. The city actually has a lot of reason to invest in this area. Candidates have the most contact with voters. So investing in candidate campaigns, candidate education, so that they are confident about the way that ranked choice voting works, and they're able to communicate it to their constituents is one of our highest priorities. And of course, resourcing voter education and outreach for hard to reach voters. This will be addressed with our partner who is bringing up, we hope to have on board by the end of June. Next slide, please. Election methods. So the Independent District Commission was created by the amendments. And currently, we have already established Independent District Commission. All four of our, currently all of our Portland City Commissioners are elected at large across, and the mayor as well as being elected at large. Sorry, I'm trying to go fast and I'm getting a little mixed up. So we're changing from our system where all of our city councilors and our mayor are elected at large to district elections. The new system will allow 3 candidates from each of our 4 districts to be elected, expanding our city council to 12 people. The mayor and the auditor will still be elected at large. After geographic districts are established, each Portlander can help elect 3 city councilors to represent their part of the city. This change is connected with Portland's transition to voter ranked choice voting. Next slide, please. We're lucky to have Sophia Alvarez Castro. She is the project manager for the vote of the Independent District Commission, and I'm sure that you will hear from Sophia at a future meeting. The Independent District Commission is, just as the name suggests, a fully independent body created to create the district plan for the city of Portland. The commission is comprised of 13 community members who were appointed on January 23rd, 2023. The commission is required to create the district plans using the voter approved district criteria and any additional criteria that the commission established, which is consistent with state and federal law. They must adopt their plan by September 1st of this year. The charter requires that the commission host 9 public hearings, one early in the process to engage on the Portland district criteria, and 2 public hearings in each of the proposed districts before voting to adopt the plan. There will be more information available on the website for the IDC, and I know that you'll have an opportunity to meet with Sophia at a future meeting. My next few slides are about the budget. I wonder if we want to go into that now, or do you want to give more time for conversation now, and we can talk about the proposed budget at a later meeting?
Is there a role for us in the budget?
For this, where we are in the current budget cycle, we've already submitted our request to the mayor so that it can be in the mayor's proposed. So we're a little bit tight up against that. And we can share the priorities of where we have invested the money for next year are outlined in the slides. So not really.
Right.
Let's give it.
So let's move to the discussion slide. And I'll just pass it back to Amber to manage the discussion. I'm thrilled that there's so many questions already.
So can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Great. So the transition plan is really a draft, and there are so many pieces that are underway. So the GTAC is the main public engagement body for the transition. There's a few discussion items on the table. How do you want the cadence of information? What are some of the key decision points? And how do we incorporate the information into the way the project works? And I know there are quite a few people that have their hands raised. I have been keeping track. Destiny, Elizabeth, Joe, and Bill, and I'm assuming it relates to, oh, and I'm sorry. Then there's Terry and Juanita.
So, my hand was just raised earlier to, I think, a comment that Mike made, which was we want the goal is to make our community more engaged, but all of this work wouldn't have been made without community engagement. So this is not reactive, this is responsive. And so I just really wanted, we're all really excited, we have great experience, but I think it's really, we need to focus on community engagement, that it's not there, but that it's been ignored. That was just a comment from earlier. And going back to these discussion questions, and those timelines and our 2-year term, I think it would be, for me, I'd be interested to make sure that the day-to-day that there are places for reviewing, and to make sure that, you know, power doesn't become established afterwards because power does what it likes. And so I think, you know, some guiding intentions about, as, you know, the first council shows up, the new mayor and the city administrator, kind of not to over exude power where there can be, and not to limit. So it checks and balance, I think, would be really important. I don't know if that's been made. I know that's in probably phase 2, but that's something I think this would be really great to have.
I can just respond to that. Yeah. Destiny, thank you so much for that question. We're going to have a presentation in a couple of weeks with Tate White, who's the project manager for establishing the roles and responsibilities for the new council and the elected officials.
Could you speak up, please?
Of course.
Thank you.
And so we'll hear from Tate about that. And one of our kind of guiding principles is that we don't put too many things in place for the new council to constrict their activities, but we want to put enough in place so that they can operate. So we're really trying to work with that balance of putting things in place to help them manage their January 2025 meetings so that they can elect a president of the council, and so that they know how to operate their meetings, but not put things in place that are too constrictive or assume that we know what committees that they want or how they want to structure their council meetings. They'll have an opportunity to have an organizational meeting where they, the 12 new council members, can do much of that work.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the presentations, really super information. I've got some questions around the balloting. And so for Washington County, which is very like a tiny little sliver that's in the city of Portland, and Clackamas County, a little bit bigger sliver, on their ballots, they'll have both traditional voting and ranked choice voting. So that's my first question. Is that correct? There won't be a separate ballot for city of Portland, but rather two different kinds of voting systems on the same ballot. Is that right?
I think you raised an interesting question that we're still exploring with the county. We're working with Multnomah County, who is kind of spearheading that conversation with the other two counties to ensure that that the ballot is understandable and transferable. So I think that decision hasn't been made yet, whether or not it will be one ballot, which includes multiple races, or if there'll be a separate insert for the city races. So I don't think that answer has been established yet.
Thank you. And then so I like part like 2 through 10 of that question, which I'm not going to all do right now. But as one of the many political scientists on this, I just want to note that the average voter is a low information voter. I know part of our job is to help educate voters, but having two types of balloting on the same, or two types of voting on the same ballot, or two different ballots. One, it's a cost to each county. Two, it's very confusing. And I just am raising the flag right now that, like a few other folks on the committee, I voted no. I have real concerns that this kind of confusion is actually going to disenfranchise those that are actually trying to get involved in the process. It's very confusing. I'm concerned about the cost to counties at a time where counties are already looking at budget cuts. So this is a statement, not a question. And I'm sure we'll dig into this later. I know we don't have oversight over that per se, but we certainly have engagement directly with the public. And I have big concerns about that.
Thank you. And we'll be sure to bring more information about our voter education plans to this group.
Yeah.
Thank you. Joe?
So I want to start out by thanking you and saying this is more exciting and meaty than I expected, which is great. And I wrote down 3 questions, which I don't expect answers to now, but they're pretty much those same 3 bullet points. And maybe the heading for all of this, I apologize, Shoshana, for hitting, sort of instant replay. But at one point you said, I'm trying to go fast and I'm getting a little mixed up. And I want to make sure that doesn't become our theme. When I went through the transition plan, I flagged 13 places where I wondered, do we have a role in that? And if you count up the bullet points in the places that you had yellow stars, more than 13, I think. And so somehow we need to really embrace what our role is. The second is just a refrain of what I sort of mentioned earlier. We need a good way for the transition team and the GTAC to be in, there's just no room for slippage or friction at all. We need a good way to communicate, fully, accurately, and in a timely way. And then the third is you've already done a ton of work, and it feels like, I don't want to say the train has left the station because that implies that we've missed it. I want to know how we catch up, what we need to do to be able to play the role that you need us to and that the community needs us to. So again, I don't expect answers to those questions, but I think we need to answer all 3 of them.
I was here for your earlier comment about how to make that connection. And I know that Mike and I will be willing to come in, you can have a standing item on your agenda for updates. There are several ways that we can make sure that you're current with our work. Like you said, a lot changes in a week. And so whatever you feel is the right cadence for us to be here. Julia has developed a really aggressive calendar of bringing all of our team members to you at key decision points. So we want you to be engaged, and we want your input.
Great.
Bill?
Yeah, I love Joe's questions because I'd like to build on them and throw out some possible ideas. It seems to me that we need your direction on 5, 6, 7 key areas that you would like us to be engaged in. And I feel like we need to break up the bylaws mentioned subcommittees. I've had a lot of really frustrating experiences during COVID about in-person and Zoom, these hybrid meetings. I find them completely unwieldy. I think you've done as best as you can tonight. But if somehow you could get us those priority areas and do some polling and let people go follow their greatest interest and be able to meet in smaller groups so that we'd actually be able to participate and give some good advice. I don't think you're going to get that if we stay in this kind of format. And I don't think you're going to get it if we spend a lot of time trying to figure out what the key decision points are that you need help on. You know them. And if we jump in and start to work with that, we'll figure out if it's going to work or if we've missed something or whatever. So.
Harry?
Yeah, the last two, Joe and Bill, sort of talked about what I would have talked about as well. Let me frame this as a question to the transition team itself. Are you all organized in subcommittees? I noticed on one of the charts you had under a type of change, you had governance and a bunch of things below it, and service delivery and bureau management, a bunch of things below it. Are you organized in that way? Does it make sense for our committees to be organized parallel to your committees? That's, I think, moving Joe and Bill's comments along, maybe that'll help. And I just also wanted to say while I'm here, thanks for you all paying attention carefully to who decides things. I wouldn't want, this transition with this staffing and this council to be making decisions for a new mayor and a new council that we have not even met yet. So I think it's just really important to respect the future council in what we're doing. And I know that's going to be difficult to do, but I'm interested in paying close attention to that, I guess. So thanks.
Juanita?
Yes, thank you so much for the comments. Are very good comments and make my brain start. First of all, I wanna say that I wanna thank the transition team for the work that they did. Going through the transition plan, the draft, you can see the incredible amount of work that needs to be done. And so thank you so much for all of the efforts that you put into this document. I just want to comment, and I just read on the chat a comment by Elizabeth, I think I got her name right, about the idea of having joint meetings with the transition team, with the committee, when we get to the point of making decisions, that are critical to this process. I also just want to make a comment that I think that in order to avoid the people being frustrated and perhaps not voting, is the educational plan is going to be critical. And I want to ask about the budget that was in the draft, that is included in the draft. There's only $200,000 for education, community education. And I'm hoping that that is not current or that is different, because it's for 2003 and 2004. And we're going to focus a lot on community education. I think that we may need more than $200,000 if we're really going to try to reach the difficult to reach communities.
Thank you. If I could just respond to that pretty quickly. We actually have $675,000 in this year's budget and an additional $200,000 in next year's budget.
Okay,
so
thank you for the clarification.
It's a total of 875 that we're out, and that's only for these 2 fiscal years. I imagine there'll be another investment in the 24-25 budget.
Thank
So we agree, we couldn't agree more. Juanita.
So I have Fred, Jose, Amy and Bill, and we have about 4 minutes left. So sorry.
Well, I really appreciate the ability to interact with you, Mike, and the administration. This is an amazing transition plan. I felt much more confident in the scope and the schedule. Although looking at it, you might want to look at that phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 chart. You say that you're not going to align the works and retiring obsolete systems until after, in the 5 years up to 2030, actually from 2025 to 2030. And is that to give leeway to the incoming council, the new policymakers, and this new demos to decide? And I would caution you that I think the voters are expecting some efficiencies to be effectuated earlier. And I think that would help us communicate with them that this was, we reduced some duplicating services. I know there's a director's cabinet that's looking at probably some of that. Does there need to be 28 bureaus? And I look at resolution 37609, which the council adopted to get this kicked off. And there's all sorts of different subgroups, arts councils and different, task forces that I don't think are probably by ordinance. They're probably by resolution or the like. And how are you keeping track of all of them? Are they communicating back through to the transition team? I know that the resolution, the council wanted a report by May 1st, which is just 2 weeks away, on the progress of each of these, from each of these commissioners and from you. And is that forthcoming, and will we be apprised of that? I mean, I think that's important information for us. And then just on the election vote, I have been a state elections officer for 11 years. It's looked like on that slide, you could vote for no more than 6. Is that the, okay. Because what if there's 12 candidates, then it's just, you get the top 6. That's all, good. That just certainly helps programming the Mark Sense ballot counters.
And just very briefly, I can't address all the questions you just asked. They're complicated and deep, and we should talk more about them. And I'm happy to come back anytime. And if in fact you organize yourselves and wish to think about subcommittees that have different focuses, I'm happy to meet with them too. You've articulated some really challenges. On the one hand, the time frame we're working within to make organizational and structural changes, and two, the question of how much do you predispose for a future city administrator, future mayor, as the executives of running the next. So there's always that kind of judgment, and you hit it right on the button. That's some of our challenge.
Yeah, I guess I would just start with, are there duplicating services?
Oh, there's no question. And we will not have 28 euros. I can guarantee that. And we will not have as many offices and little things that just kind of have accumulated over the years. Let's put it that way.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Jose, do you still have your hand up? I can't see.
No, I put it down. My question was covered and time.
Thank you. Thank you. We just have 2 last, Amy Randall and then Bill Kinsey.
Yeah, so thank you so much for the work you guys have done. I was curious when an outreach plan is going to be provided to us. I'm aware there's a consulting firm that we're working with to provide that to us. Will we have access to like a voter file or anything to determine like our access? And is there like a timeline for the outreach timeline? Because that might inform our subcommittee work.
Julia, do you want to talk about next steps? But
Actually, I was sharing with someone where the restroom was. So I didn't hear the first part of your question.
I wanted to know a timeline for the outreach plan. So I'm aware there's a firm that the city is working with that's developing that outreach field plan. So
For better education in particular.
no, for the government for the advocacy work. Like an outreach field.
Our community engagement plan for the entire project or the voter education?
Or specifically GTAC.
Yes, we will be developing it. I kind of have a draft. Many of you have seen a draft engagement framework, and then we'll do planning with Amber. And I'm gonna actually see, not today, but at our next meeting, if any folks want to work more closely with me, you know, for a month or two on drafting that plan.
Because tentatively you have it down for June the 20th. So
There's a date.
there's the date, right? So that's really good. That's a framework, and then we'll do. And I just want to say, even though I don't have my hand up because my machine crashed, that the document is the Government Transition Advisory Committee proposed schedule, which kind of like lists all the meetings that we've got on our books. Has a really nice outline when we were saying, you know, where do these guys want us to drop in? It looks really, really good as a starting point to me. I mean, I'm so excited to get going on it. And nice work, everybody. It's a lot of work. Just one quick question is, are there any naysayers? Are there any detractors out there that we should be really working with? I mean, just all of the work that was done, and then City Council came out of left field. I mean, the way that this will not go forward is that if the project slows, and are there people or systems or anybody that will slow that we need to bring into the tent?
I think we have to recognize that while 58% of Portlanders who voted in the election supported the measure, there were a sizable amount of Portlanders who didn't support the measure. So I think that we will have our work cut out for us to invest in time and effort in communities all across the city to ensure that Portlanders value and trust the work that we're doing, and that they see the difference. It's really about, are they actually seeing the difference in the way that we go? So that's our effort. You know, I don't think that we'll get there in 2 years, but over time, demonstrating on our success and making progress every year, I think that we will get.
Shoshona, you don't see anything that would stop this project other than the work not getting done before November 2024. There's no process that you have to go to council, or there's no group of people out there that would do whatever, right? It's okay because we've already passed this at the polls and we're moving forward.
There are key decision points for the council to make. They will be affirming, providing a budget for the next several cycles in order to fund the work that we're doing. Of course, they will be adopting code regularly, and ultimately the council is the decision maker about a large part of the work in terms of the organizational structure that we'll put forward, the budget to fund the work. All of those things will go to council for their approval. I think that you're asking, is there mounted opposition, or, you know, I imagine that there are people that are very happy about the charter changes, and I'm sure that there are people that are wondering if there are opportunities to undo that.
Okay, so I think that that's something that we could probably help if that begins to look like it's coming over the hill.
So, Mr. Kinsey, you have the last word, and then we need to move on to the next steps and adjourn the meeting.
Well, okay, well, thank you. And calling me William is just fine to avoid confusion with Bill Farber.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, sir.
I was thinking of a couple potentially helpful suggestions to help us, the Transition Advisory Committee, advise the transition team. Perhaps before meetings, you can tell us what you want us to do during the meeting. You know, this meeting was introduction, but if there's action you want us to take, knowing that in advance will be helpful. If you want us to review documents such as the draft transition plan that Julia sent to us earlier, I'm wondering if something like a Google Doc could be helpful where one can go in and offer edits. Thanks, but also just potential comments.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can you pull up the slides? Thank you. So for those of you that are interested in becoming co-chairs, we would love to have co-chairs for the Monday's meeting next week. If you're willing to serve, please send an email to Julia by end of day on Thursday. And again, don't forget, these are rotational positions, but this will just get us through, reviewing the foundational work that we're doing thus far. So our next meeting is next Monday from 6 to 8 p.m. And if you can go to the next slide. So this is an overview of our upcoming schedule. We have a lot to go through. In the next meeting, we will have public comment. We'll discuss the bylaws again and the working agreements. We didn't get to those today. And we'll be meeting between now and 2025. There's going to be at least 30 more meetings in total. This is really a high level overview of the first 10 meetings. And please keep in mind that these are proposed agenda items. Topics may shift, but we'll continue to talk about the foundational documents at the next meeting. And we will be taking public comment at our next meeting. And all of these meetings are posted on the webpage for community members that are listening online. And with that, I am going to recommend that we adjourn the meeting.
Any objection?
There was a second in the room.
Yes, sure there was. Wow, fabulous. Y'all have a wonderful evening.